with something that's more of an umbrella organization than a specific code program. And so I'll wait for presentations to come up. So what we try and do is slightly different. In our part of the world, the very last thing we want to do is make governments more efficient, when very often they're kleptocracies or they're repressive regimes. So we do exactly what Code for America and very many other organizations do, but we try and work from the bottom up instead by empowering citizen champions. In many cases, the media, very often civil society, but more grassroots movements. These are things like unions, churches, and so forth. And then increasingly now, as you heard from Greg earlier on, we're busy starting to float with governments. Something happened to my side, so we're not based out in the ocean. But currently we're going to be your mic's not on. Sorry, guys. We currently have affiliates in 5 countries at various stages. Some, like Code for Kenya and Code for South Africa, are over 2 years old or approaching 2 years. Others, like Nigeria, Ghana, and so forth, are still in startup mode. And they also adopt different kinds of models. The Code for South Africans are very entrepreneurial, almost like kind of social enterprise driven. Some of the ones in Ghana and Ethiopia are more NGO focused. What do? Well, we try and create active citizenry, and we try and do that by facilitating deeper and more meaningful engagement. The South Africans say that better informed decision making. Often you don't even have the ability to make decisions in many of these societies. So simply getting people actionable information is revolutionary in many of their lives. The kinds of principles that we use with all of our projects across all of these very different organizations across Africa is that they're all super kind of focused on citizen issues, the kinds of things that keep people awake at night. What is it that puts or gets people cold sweats about their children, about their futures, about their own livelihoods, and then trying to see whether data or other kinds of technologies can provide answers to some of those challenges. We try and ensure that any of these solutions that we try and build or that we help people create themselves are hyper-personal, not just local, but that we try and bring it right down to village or to home level so that it's information that is not generic, which is what has happened very much in the past. People only find national level data or information, including from traditional champions like the media. And then anything that we do, we try and ensure is action-orientated. So it leads to, or it gives people the information that they need to take physical, positive action to change things in their societies. This is a photograph from an election queue in Kenya 2 years ago. And you can see that people, even though they're living in largely dysfunctional societies, are really engaged about trying to improve the societies and the economies that they live in. But you've got to be realistic. This is a picture of an actual government records archive in Nigeria, the Ministry of Health. And these are real government records that they asked us to turn into data. So they said, well, we're looking at doing a project around just blood stocks. When hospitals have blood stocks of certain types, at the moment they do not share that information between clinics or hospitals. So you can literally die in a kind of minor operation simply because the hospital doesn't know where to get blood that could save your life. And when we jumped in and we volunteered, perhaps stupidly, that we'd help them solve this is where they led us. And they said, well, here are the records. Can you turn this into a cell phone app? Which is actually an opportunity. Because with enough volunteers and scanners and helping people just learn how to use things like spreadsheets, you can actually start improving in a massive way the way that they manage and that they understand the information that they work with. So you can have big impacts with very low investments initially. At the moment, we've been operating for about 4 years. We've got a portfolio of about over 90 projects across the continent. They're not all just data. They range from drones and sensor projects through to citizen reporting, crowd verification, and a lot of media projects. Why media? Because media were the first investors into our program. It wasn't NGOs, it wasn't kind of governments or agencies. Media understood that they were losing relevance in the lives of their own audiences, and they looked at data as a way of personalizing that and creating data-driven news tools. We also help support a far larger community across Africa. There are about 30,000 members of the online community of hacks and hackers. They have chapters, they do monthly meetups, they play with data. And the kinds of things that they build are these kinds of very simple tools. It's the same premise or the same background philosophy as the living wage tool that Greg spoke about earlier on. This was a tool that simply through SMS, driven by spreadsheets on the back, but through SMS and through a very simple website, helped people in Kenya find out where to register for the elections, check whether their registration was correct, and then during the polls, because they tend to be fairly violent, over 1,000 people died in the last elections, the elections before this one. During the polls, the ability to then send peace SMSs, so SMSs to politicians on the Hastings, urging them to not kind of rile up people or create violence. That tool was built for under $1,000, and the Electoral Authority in Kenya said that they saw a marked spike in the number of people going in to register for the elections. It then has been scaled across 5 other countries, including in Malawi, where the government then adopted it as the formal solution, the official solution for checking or verifying that you were registered and that your registration details were correct at least. They identified upwards of 40,000 ghost voters using the system. Again, deployment at a national level cost no more than $10,000. Same technology on the back end, just slightly more sophisticated, but still primarily spreadsheet-driven and the simplest, cheapest, off-the-shelf tools that we could find. There's another tool that's had also great success in Kenya initially, and now it's scaled out to 3 other countries, using government-available data that is very difficult for people to access or understand, building simple tools, again, SMS-driven, that allow you to check whether your doctor's registered and is a real doctor, whether they've got malpractice suits against them, whether you're covered by your national health insurance kind of fund for any treatment you're getting, and then to find your specialties. These tools cost us in the region of about $250 to build, and the media partner reports that they get 80,000 hits per month, people using the tools. That generates revenue for them, which means that once we've built it, we step back and they maintain and they continue running these projects for us. So we don't become overwhelmed with the technologies we build. The other big thing that we do that's maybe slightly different to what happens up in the north is that we very aggressively focus on government services or on those choke points or kind of friction points in societies that make people disillusioned or disengaged from digital democracies. Corruption is big, and it's not just civil servants. There are corruptors at play as well in the private sector. So with people like Friedrich Lindenberg, who's in the audience here as well from Germany, and others, we've now started to look at using open data to build technologies that help people shine a light on public processes. So not helping government become more effective at procurement, because there are great initiatives from the World Bank and others that are already doing that, but rather giving citizens the tools to shine a very bright light on their procurement process and then figure out who the puppet masters are in their societies. So who are the people behind the deals? And that results in some of Africa's largest and most impactful data-driven stories. We've mapped, for example, the Italian mafia's property and other holdings across Africa in 5 countries. We're about to do another 5 in Wave 2. And we're busy mapping at the moment the ownership of oil rigs and other extractive industries in places like Nigeria, where the Nigerian government says that $18 billion a year is lost just through tax avoidance by people playing games about where they're registered. They're unable to decipher the web companies, the shell companies, using data, we're able to help them track who the real beneficial owners are behind many of those rigs. And then also in large international collaborations with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, also shining a spotlight on Australian mining in Africa, and the World Bank itself, using World Bank money and the World Bank's open data policy, turning that round and using it, shining a light on them to show how World Bank funding has displaced 3 million people across the world without giving them compensation. All of this built on top of the same kinds of civic data tools that we're using to build service delivery monitors and dashboards. So that's just a very quick overview. I've tried to highlight some of the things that we do that are slightly different to what some of our colleagues in the north are doing. And there are guys right throughout the audience, maybe all the African guys, stick up your hands, like the brigade guys. So we've got Kenyans, Nigerians, South Africans, and I think those are the only ones. Our Ethiopian colleague, unfortunately, couldn't make it. So thanks very much.